Nice beatdown of the Yankees, Falvey. Only the nerdiest nerds remember specifics about spring training games months later. But if the Twins go on to win the World Series, or at least take the AL Central title again, we could all do worse than remembering the Grapefruit League win against the Yankees on March 6th. Quick, before we forget what happened, let's get locked on Twins.
You are Locked On Twins, your daily Minnesota Twins podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Oh, hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Locked On Twins, your daily go-to source for the top Minnesota Twins insight, discourse, and analysis. Personally, it's my favorite show of the Imperial Locked On Podcast Network, which, by the way, brings you your team every day. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons where applicable. I'm Dave Brown, an MLB writer who is old enough to remember when the Twins did spring training at that crazy-looking Joe Tinker Field in Orlando that butted up against a giant football stadium. I bet Kent Herbeck liked looking out there at the underside of the grandstand of the Citrus Bowl, wondering what could have been. Anyway, I'm also a BBWA member and a Hall of Fame voter. Good for me. Across the Great Plains of cyberspace is Brandon Warren, who is more of an Evers than he is a Tinker or a Chance, I think. Brandon was a Twins fan who became a Twins writer, and now he's both, as the site expert at Puckett's Pond, a blog about the Twins. Go read Puckett's Pond. On the podcast today, Joe Ryan with a huge outing. That outing is huge. His first this spring after his Terry's major shoulder strain. Try saying that 10 times fast, or even saying. The strain that cost him the final 7 weeks of the 2024 season and possibly cost the Twins the playoffs. Although, if you remember, they really shut down completely. It wasn't just that, but that certainly seemed to start it. It's a good thing that Joe Ryan had a good game because Zebby Matthews became the most recent injured Twins pitcher. Also noting that Justin Topa and Matt Cantorino have gone down in the past few days. And what else? The Twins are the 11th best team in Major League Baseball. Are you ready to celebrate, Brandon?
Yes. Yes, I certainly am. It's a step in the right direction because, as people will come to find out, it still means that they are one of, if not the best teams in the division. So, still exciting.
The really big news, and like no matter what the outcome was, we figured that it would be. Joe Ryan, 2 innings. Averaged 93.9, I think, on his fastball. It was his first outing of the season after, the Twins, it seemed like they were pleased or optimistic every time we got a report about how Ryan was doing in the offseason. So it isn't like a huge surprise that he went out and pitched well against the Yankees. He used this sweeper. Rocco thought it was a cute little pitch. He didn't say cute, but I was almost imagining that. He's got that little sweeper, that little slider he throws. It's a darling change of speed. But it was what Joe Ryan wanted to see as far as his fastball velocity and his swing and misses. And it's really good news for the Twins. Just not because there's a bunch of other injury news, but we're paranoid here about people getting hurt, Falvey. And if Joe Ryan looks like he's ready to start 2025 kind of the way he ended before he got hurt.
Yeah, kind of interesting that it preempted Zebby's little mishap. So it is certainly positive, and knock on wood. I don't want to knock too loud because the dog's upstairs and might bark. But if the Twins can go into the regular season with their top 5 guys, and I'm including Chris Paddock in that, healthy and ready to go, that still leaves David Festa on the outside looking in. And as I said on my message board, I freaking love David Festa. And so for him to be your 6th starter, and then you have some depth beyond that, whether it's, you could bring Randy Dobnak along. He's looked good at times this spring and could fill in or whatever. I think, though, having 5 healthy starters where you're not scrambling to see who's going to be that 5th starter is something to look forward to. Granted, we're still 3 weeks from opening day, so a lot can happen between now and then. But ultimately, yes, very encouraging to see Joe Ryan. I mean, I don't know that I let myself get too concerned about it, but there was definitely a thought in the back of my mind, like, if it goes on too much longer that he hasn't pitched yet, you need some time to ramp up, because you go, 45, 60, 85, and then 100 theoretically for your ramp up. Like, you can do about 15 pitches at a time, or so. So yeah, I'm glad to see he got out there and is moving in the right direction.
37 pitches today, 23 strikes, I believe. Doing that from memory on the box.
Good ratio, though. Hashtag ratio.
Very, very hashtaggy. Phil Miller, I think Phil's always got an angle on why he writes the way he does. And at first I didn't understand, but I think I do now, like the third time through. This is Phil Miller, the second graph in the Star Tribune, talking to Ryan Jeffers about Joe Ryan's day. I forget the facial expressions that it's on the mound, he said. It's been so long since I caught him during the game, you forget that it's constant weird facial expressions. So at first, I thought Phil just put that in there because it was kind of funny, offbeat quote from Jeffers about Joe Ryan. But I think what he's saying is, in the subtext, is that it was kind of like midseason form for him. That's another way of putting it, that Joe Ryan, whatever he was doing out there, however he was operating, it was like when he's really good at midseason. And, he was in the process, I think, last year of having a breakout type season. I didn't pick him for my 5 Twins making the All-Star team deal. That's part of a Puckett's Pond post.
Yep.
PTP. But actually, if the Twins were to do something like that, send a bunch of people to the All-Star game, it probably would be pitchers. It'd probably be Pablo on a roll. It'd probably be Joe Ryan. It'd probably be Bailey Ober, getting hot. Griffin Jacks. Yeah. It would help if he were the closer, but if Jackson's got like a 9.99 ERA at the All-Star break, which I think he might, that'd be a bold prediction too. So I think Jeffers is saying Joe Ryan, same old guy, and that's a great sign, I think.
Yeah, I think it was kind of like also a boy, that was nice to see situation, like a sight for sore eyes, because they missed him desperately down the stretch. I mean, they missed a lot of guys, and there's different places that you can call the beginning of the end of the end, and the middle of the end. But him going down in Chicago was definitely a big deal. I was watching it. I mean, this is going to sound kind of smarmy, but on an airplane, and I just remember thinking, they are in big, big trouble. We were on our way flying to Oregon, and I just thought, man, it's not good, because I think it might have been the day after the deadline or right around the deadline, and the Twins hadn't really done anything. And yeah, it just, again, I try not to figure out what's the beginning of the end in the moment, because things are so fluid in a baseball season and they change so much. But for me, that's one of the more obvious, like, it's Joe Ryan, Joe over. That was one of the moments where, though, it was like, ugh, they're in trouble, man. They're in deep doo-doo.
You were right. And I don't usually, like that first reaction to be, well, everyone, let's just jump off of Niagara Falls. But that turned out to be true, coincidentally or causationally, it was. And, sort of speaking of that, you don't want to dwell too much. Because you don't know, you don't want to dwell too much on moments like, well, this is where everything turns around or whatever, because oftentimes it doesn't happen that way. But I really got a good feeling watching this game today. The way the Twins just seemed ready. It was like they were ready for the first game of a big series in August. And I know that's weird because it's spring training, but it is George Steinbrenner Field. It is the Yankees.
But as you wrote too, they faced all Yankee, like a lot of Yankee pitchers too. Like, that's important. You wrote that. It was a very good point.
Yeah, most of the Yankees were in the lineup. Juan Soto wasn't in the lineup because he's not on the Yankees anymore. But most of the other guys from last year were there. And some guys that they've added, Paul Goldschmidt and so forth, to kind of make up for Soto.
Did you hear the Goldie thing that they said about him not challenging strikes?
Remind me.
I think it was like Eduardo Perez. And by the way, I thought the broadcast was abysmal, and we can talk about that too. But Eduardo Perez, like Paul Goldschmidt's he said he's not going to really use the ABS this spring because he feels it's disrespectful to the home plate umpire.
What a sweetie pie.
Yeah.
That's almost kind of like what, isn't that kind of like what Scherzer said in a different way? Hey, these are humans. We should let humans judge us because
it reminds me of the joke. What 75% of all 911 calls in Canada are just to say thank you.
It was. Yeah, that's true. He's not from Canada, but it's strike me as a nice young man. Yes. The Yankees, they were too nice to challenge. Well, the Yankees weren't too nice to challenge, most of them, because at some point during this game, and I'll talk about the performance of the Twins again in a second, but at some point in this game, the Twins had challenged strikes 4 times and were right every time and got the call reversed. And the Yankees had run out of challenges already. Because
I'm telling you, this is the new framing. This is the new framing coming up.
Well, the only thing is, I mean, at some point you don't have any more challenges to make. And then you'll probably get tired of running out of challenges in the first inning. So you probably wait too long to use your challenges. People talk about this, using challenges late in the game as if you're certain to have one that you need to challenge in the 8th or 9th inning. You might
like
not.
saving your best relievers for a game that you never. Yeah.
So is it going to take like 5 years for us to go through that whole thing where high leverage becomes, and then because it's weird though, because doesn't it seem like closers are kind of back a little bit? It's like before we were like, oh, now they're going to bring the closer in the 7th inning every time, but they don't do that.
Jeffers challenging the one that ended up striking out Chisholm was a really, really good strategic spot too, because the Yankees had put some runners on, and it was I don't know, what was it, a 1-2, 2-2 pitch? I mean, it ended up ending the inning, and maybe people don't like that as much. Just like a plate appearance ending by a time disqualification, where you step out of the whatever. They're a little anticlimactic, but get the call right. I got no problem with that.
My favorite part about that, again, Ryan Jeffers in the middle of an interesting quote, not from him, but about him. Joe Ryan said that Joe Ryan's like, I'm not going to do anything with the umpire. I'm not going to, I'm going to tap my head as a signal to Jeffers to challenge the call because he really knows what he's doing. And he's such a good framer. And weren't we talking the other day about how Jeffers statistically has been not a good framer?
Might have been just yesterday. Yeah, literally.
Well, I forget sometimes what we talk about on here a day later, but
we've been busy.
Yeah, StatCast, we have been. StatCast does not rate Jeffers very well on framing. Now that doesn't mean that he wouldn't know what a strike was.
Yeah, it reminds me of a Joe Mauer theory that we should maybe talk about. We should take a quick break though.
Oh, you want to do? I thought we only had one break.
Yes, but it's first, and we got to talk about D's.
All right, we're going to talk about D's after this break or during.
Of course, I'm talking about D's nuts, and in this case, it's Pistachios. If you're looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious, you can crack into a good source of protein with wonderful pistachios. I've been trying to do like a modified keto carnivore. I'm just starting up with that. And I can tell you right now, pistachios are going to be a huge part of it because you want to feel satiated with protein and fiber. And wonderful pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts you'll find out there. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your recommended daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keeping you feel fuller longer. I am of the iteration of the shells. I like picking them, either with picking apart with the teeth, kind of like you do like sunflower seeds on the baseball field. And it allows me, like I've said before, to kind of slow my roll and eat them a little bit more deliberately. However, if you want a no-shell variety, if you just want to dive into a handful of them, they've got that variety too. But again, we keep them up on the bedside table. It's a very popular before bed snack in the Warren household. So either way, though, they can get you going. You can get snackin and get crackin with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Now, Dave, I did want to share with you that a former Twins catcher told me, and a former Twins pitcher, that there were some pitchers who were skeptical of pitching to Joe Mauer because of his height and how that might affect the strike zone being called compared to Drew Butera, who is a little more prototypical catcher size. And so I also thought, yeah, that's an interesting point too. Like if Joe Ryan thinks that Ryan Jeffers is good at framing, does that matter more than the data? If a pitcher thinks that they'd rather throw to Drew Butera than Joe Mauer, did that matter? Like Carl Pavano more or less used Drew Butera as his personal catcher. Not exactly like, what was it, Greg Maddux and Eddie Perez, but still like it was his preference. And I don't know. I mean, Pavano wasn't a big strikeout guy. If you're not going to get strikeouts, you need to steal strikes. Maybe there was something to it. And maybe even if the data says something else, what a pitcher thinks between his ears is pretty important too.
Where else is he going to think but between his ears? No.
Don't ask. I won't answer that. I'll make a Scott Erickson, Inga Hammond reference, and you don't want to know what that's about.
I do know what that's about, but
yeah,
I'm not
wasn't
sure.
Thinking with his head though.
Pitch framing stats. Something it bothers me about. That bothers me about pitch framing stats is kind of a similar thing that bothers me about defensive metrics, and I'm just not 100% sure that they have it right, because there's discrepancies and there's this contradiction. I think we talked about this already, but I asked Ryan Jeffers at the beginning of last year why his framing stats were down, and he was basically like, "Don't believe those numbers that you see." Well, now, maybe he was just being rationalizing it, but that's what he said. And now Joe Ryan comes out and says he's great at pitch framing, which he used to be, but hasn't been in a couple of years.
And not really in the Joe Ryan era either. Like Joe Ryan pitched for the Twins a little while in 22 and then 2023. So, I mean, it's not like he's working with them a ton.
That doesn't add up either. But
one question I had, and I've kind of bounced it around with a couple people about catcher framing, is even if you don't trust the numbers, do you trust the ranking? Like if you were to strip out the actual data, like trying to convince yourself that a catcher is 10 runs above replacement and that's equal to 1 win in the real life game. If I were to give you a list of how they ranked and scrub the numbers, do you think that would be closer to accurate?
Possibly. It possibly would.
And maybe I'm talking myself into circles, because at the end of the day, they're ranked by those numbers. It just, I don't know. It's just a thought. It's just a thought.
It's possible that you made a good point too about what does Joe Ryan really believe out there? Does he think that Jeffers is doing a good job framing and he doesn't know the numbers, or he has different sets of statistics than we do, maybe more accurate? You would think that.
Well, didn't they say there was such a thing as field effects back in the day that maybe teams had access to, but fans didn't?
There are things like that out there, yes.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff that teams have access to that we don't. So
I would love to see some of that.
I would too. I don't know. I mean, if it's a league thing, I think it shouldn't be proprietary for each team, but maybe it is.
Not exactly the scouting bureau or anything.
No, it isn't. It's a different process entirely. But this game, until Zebby got hurt, I liked how, Wallner hit a home run against Cole, worked back from an 0-2 count, hit it really hard.
After striking out the first time too, like he made adjustments and he came in with, I think, like a 500 OPS on the spring. So not that, you're starting to count those sorts of things, but we saw a guy who did not get out of a hole early last year. I think he has a different type of confidence or a different type of understanding that, like, okay, that plate appearance didn't go the way I wanted it to. I struck out. That's something I'm going to struggle with no matter what. And Gerrit Cole's a big-time strikeout pitcher, at least has been in the past. And he adjusted. And, boy, yeah, he smoked the crap out of that ball. They had Cody Bellinger on the mic, which I absolutely hate. but like basically hit it over Cody Bellinger, and Cody's like just watching it leave. And then I think the Twins scored 5 runs that inning, and he's like, I'm never doing this again. That was one day after
playing right field. He means no, get it. Being
well, the Jesus Luzardo 3 straight homers on 3 straight pitches with his manager mic'd up. Like that was back-to-back days of that. And then Rocco comes on, and the Twins get a quick 1-2-3. Didn't see that in your spreadsheets, did you, Falvey?
No, I totally missed it. So that was good news, and I like Brooks Lee. He had a hard single against Cole and a pretty hard home run as well. So that's good. Mickey Gasper's heating up. I don't know where Mickey's going to play unless there's more injuries.
I do.
St. Paul.
Okay. It's like, sorry.
Yeah.
Not a Gopher.
Sandy, if we kill all the Gophers. Yeah.
Gophers.
He looks like, I mean, I don't know if like exactly how valuable, but the dude Gasper looks like he can hit. So that's been encouraging.
Kind of a Williams Astudillo vibe where like you don't want him to catch, but he can do a little bit of everything. And not a bad like 26th man on your roster. Again, not analogous in the sense that he never strikes out and that sort of thing. But a guy who could be a fun character on a team.
Gasper's the kind of guy that, like, if this were the Rays or the Guardians or some kind of team that the Mariners, some team that sort of competes but doesn't spend all the money, they wouldn't have signed Ty France. They would just let Gasper play first base and he'd be okay.
David Fry. It's literally David Fry.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, we're on the same page with that. The discouraging news was Zebby. Now this injury, it's a hip injury. They haven't done an MRI or anything like that, but this kind of abdominal deal is not like a long-term injury. It's not like a knee or a shoulder or a joint or something like that. I mean, the hip is a joint, I guess, but it's not as bad as those things. Now, it might take a while for him to get back, but if they're patient and he's patient, he'll be able to build back up. But I think an injury 3 weeks to go in the season, in the spring training season, I don't see him being able to come back even from a mild injury.
Right.
It keeps him out for a week, let's say. Let's be real optimistic and say it's a week before he throws again. That's going to set him back. I think Zebby, as well as he was pitching, was probably still ticketed for AAA. But, I mean, if he went through the entire spring training healthy and didn't give up any runs, you kind of wonder if they would take him north. But before spring training started, we weren't necessarily counting on him being out of the chute with the Twins. They still have lots of depth. You mentioned Festa. There's other rookies too that they could put in there. Woods Richardson's anything short of a disaster, and the rest of the way, and he's going north. Chris Paddock hasn't been great, but they're probably not going to. There's no such thing as non-tender anymore. They're probably going to keep him.
Well, and now with Zebby sidelined, it'd be foolish to just dump him.
So isn't it a good thing they kept Paddock? I mean, we weren't saying that before, but that's why you don't knee-jerk reaction. Why is this guy still here? Well, because stuff happens at spring training. Yeah. So Zebby's gone down with a hip. It was a nice play too. It was a swinging bunt by Mr. Paul Goldschmidt, who's polite to umpires, and he fielded it well. It was good athleticism and hustle, and he made a nice throw. But he slipped on the dirt. It was a freak thing. The way he talked about the injury, though, it made it sound. He said he aggravated it, or maybe even re-aggravated. It just sounded like maybe there was something there before. I don't know. I need more clarification on that. That's the only thing that sort of struck me as, oh, really? About the Zebby injury, that he made it sound like, or the reporter made it sound like, or I made it sound like listening to it, that there was some injury there before that had kind of healed and now is back. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's a little concerning. But again, it's not a shoulder or an elbow. Those are the worst things. And it's not a knee.
I didn't see any history of a hip in like a Google search. Now, with that said, it's obviously tough to say a minor leaguer is going to have the kind of coverage where they'll bring that up. and he blitzed through the minors last year. He probably wasn't even on a team long enough for someone to figure out if his hip was bothering him. So it's I don't know, but it's at least I saw precautionary, but even if they back off him a week or 10 days, like you were saying, that pretty much precludes him from being ready for the big league season. And does AAA start like a week after now? I think it used to be like a week after. Yeah. I could see him being more ready for that. And I mean, maybe being their opening day starter. Maybe Dobnak gets the nod as a respect thing. Maybe Festa is the best pitcher down there. But yeah, I think Zebby could be ready for opening day at AAA. But I do think this takes him off the radar as far as getting selected to be on the team to start the season.
It's just a little bit of a bummer. An opening day for them, by the way, is this month. It's the 28th. So it's a whole day after the Twins start.
Oh, so it's close. Okay, it used to be I think a week after.
When they consolidated the minor leagues, they threw it all up for grabs again. So they changed how they did that. So there's no more delay. But in our last segment, so we've covered the Yankees game, and I just liked the Twins' attitude. And I think Rocco talked about, being bold and, being ambitious. And I think that the Twins players maybe caught the Yankees by surprise by actually playing to win a spring training game. And that's not usually what you do, but I just like that they kind of put that together and had a nice game. On that note, the Twins, according to MLB.com, Will Leach, who's kind of sort of a guy like me, but more successful, just kind of a and Mike Petriello, who is a very good analyst, conspired to rank the top 30 teams. Well, there are only 30 teams, all the teams, to see who's the favorite to go to the World Series. The Twins are the 11th favorite to have Rocco's parade and go to the World Series. I think that's maybe a little low. I think they should be like 9th.
Yeah.
But they are number 1 in the AL Central. So they're the highest ranking in the AL Central by a coin flip. I think by a literal coin flip over the Tigers, with the Royals and Guardians expected to regress and the White Sox expected to be the White Sox. Do you see the Twins as the 11th best team in the league?
I mean, it's tough because you compare AL and NL as a whole, but only one of the teams from each league makes it. And so, I don't know, doesn't that kind of disjointed a little bit? Like, if you've got 5 NL teams and then an AL team.
Yes. Well, so, this is sort of like a true power ranking of this is who's going to win the World Series.
Sure, but I guess I'm thinking of it as get to the World Series, which is foolish. But
so the American League should have its own list of 15, maybe.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I mean, that would have been a fun exercise too. And if you have the Twins, like, who's head and shoulders above the Twins in the AL this year? And honestly, nobody. I mean, the rest of the league, especially with Soto now out of the league in the AL. The AL, every team's got questions. Yankees got question marks about their starting pitching behind Gerrit Cole, and Cole got obliterated today. And Houston's not the Houston of old. Texas is going to be really dang good, but again, will they stay healthy? So yeah, I think 11th is probably a little low, but I think you'd rather be slept on than propped up at this point in the spring. And I think that's a good thing for the Twins, to be somehow slept on, but still the top team in the division. So I'm not really going to lament it. And I think Mike Petriello is largely Twins positive. He's usually pretty good about his Twins analysis. I'm a big fan. So I have no gripes. I think 11th is fine. I would have preferred 8th, 9th, or 10th, but that's really splitting hairs. It's like trying to figure out who's the 10th best quarterback in the NFL. Whatever. It's like Keith Law said, the difference between prospect 30 and prospect 80 or whatever is like not that big.
Well, I still say they're better than the Cubs, and I'm not.
They are better than the Cubs.
They're not. I don't think.
But the NL Central sucks too. So like, The Reds are good, or are they? I don't know. So I mean,
I don't know.
tough.
They have Francona, which Francona gives them credibility, but they still have lots of Redsian problems. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Hunter Green threw like 18 sliders in the strike zone in his previous start, so that's a good sign. But I think they're the best team in the AL Central. I feel pretty much about the Twins like I did feel about them last year. It is very similar. I have less confidence because of what happened, and I'm have been around Twins fans closer for a whole season now. So I feel the angst and the worry a little bit more, and that has an impact on. But academically speaking, that even though they didn't have a great offseason, Falvey, because they really weren't allowed to, I think they're still the best team in the AL Central, and I think the Guardians have slipped, and I think the Tigers still that was a great hot streak at the end, but they're not that great.
Their pitching is nasty. Their pitching is nasty, but their offense does nothing.
It is the relief pitching. The starting pitching, I don't know about the Cleveland starting pitching. So
no, I mean Detroit's starting
Detroit.
pitching. I love their starters.
They're pretty good, and they're pretty deep too. They get a lot of people out in the bullpen. I don't know if they have enough hitting though.
No,
they could have used Bregman, but I don't know that Bregman even makes that much of a difference. But it's nice that the Twins are at least in the conversation. We can't say that they weren't, nobody believed in us. And in a way that's true, but I think most of those people live in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Yeah. So from the outside looking in, things are a little more optimistic. But anyway, that will do it for this episode.
Make sure the fantasy baseball read.
No, I'm not. You didn't have to say that.
I'm sorry. I'll cut it out.
Before we go, thank you for making Locked On Twins your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Fantasy Baseball podcast with hosts Dominic Martino and Matthew Ane. MLB fantasy draft season is here. It's too soon. But be the most informed fan anyway and set yourself up for a league win. Find Locked On Twins podcast on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And with that, we are going to Alexei Casilla tomorrow night.